Welcome back to another episode of Thinking That Matters. I'm Elizabeth Mahusai, your show host, and I am so pleased to have on the show today Felicia Harris Hoss. And I'm not going to say another word aside from say, please tell us who you are, what you do, so that we can launch into the conversation that we are about to have.
Oh, Elizabeth, thank you so much for the opportunity. I am so excited to be here. So who I am a trial lawyer turned mediator and arbitrator. I'm a full-time independent mediator and arbitrator in the Houston, Texas region. I spent the first 20 plus years of my career as a trial lawyer working in regional and national law firms in the Houston area, and represented companies, help them resolve commercial disputes in all sorts of industries, including energy, healthcare, financial services, claims like breach of contract, business torts, disparagement, defamation, breach of fiduciary duty, all those sexy things.
All those things that we get
hear about, right? Anyways, about 5 years ago, I pivoted my practice out of the courtroom and into the conference room, out of the public arena into the private. And now I sit as a neutral. I don't take clients anymore. I simply help lawyers help their clients get out of the courthouse or through the courthouse much faster in my mediation role. In my arbitrator role, I basically serve as a private judge. I'm on the American Arbitration Association's commercial, energy, and consumer panels. And I actually serve as a merits arbitrator in some mass arbitrations as well. And so that's me in a nutshell. And what I do nowadays is completely stay neutral in all of my matters.
Wow. Okay. I have so many questions. All right. So first, what led you to go to law school and become a lawyer to begin with?
Great question. Well, I originally went to school thinking I was going to be a broadcast journalist. And then I ended up specializing in public relations at Texas A&M University, graduating in 1992. Moved to the Houston area after that. And, it was the time when it was hard to get a job. So I ended up selling cars for a little while. And then until I got a job at Coca-Cola, selling Coca-Cola. I like to joke and say I used to sell Coca-Cola.
I love it.
And someone told me once I should go to law school. My grandfather was a lawyer. My uncle was a lawyer. And so I applied, and lo and behold, I got rejected from every single school I applied to.
Really?
Yes. But fear not. I was married at the time, and my husband had gotten accepted to one of the schools. So I called up the admissions person and said, told them my story and said, look, we wanted to go together. I didn't get accepted. I graduated with honors from A&M. What gives? Is there anything I can do? She said, your LSAT score was a couple points too low. Retake it, get it up. We'll let you in. They held my application. And on the Thursday before the Monday of classes beginning, I got a call, said, you've been accepted. Come down, pay your fees, and start class on Monday. And so
wow.
I got my own train to law school.
That is, okay, that's really cool. And so from broadcast journalism, which I have to imagine served you well, and still serves you well in terms of your training of speaking publicly, one-on-one with people. Am I onto something there?
Absolutely. Before I applied to law school, my neighbor growing up was Judge Ed Kincaid. He's on the federal bench in the Dallas area. At the time, he was not on the federal bench. He was on a lower court, a state court bench. And anyways, I called him up and said, can you give me any advice? So I went and met him in chambers, and he talked with me, and I told him what I was doing. He said, there's a couple of things that you said that were really important, Felicia. One of them is that you're a journalism major, because you'll be lots of writing in law school and in the practice of law.
True.
And the second thing, and this was one that I thought was kind of quirky, but very interesting. He said, it's cool that you've actually waited tables. So I waited tables in college. He said, because then you learn how to serve people, you learn how to read people, you learn how to connect with people. And those two things will serve you well as a lawyer. Fast forward, I graduated first in my class from law school, was an editor on the Law Review, and went and clerked for Chief Justice Casey at the Fort Worth Court of Appeals for a year before going and becoming lawyer number 14 at a boutique down here in Houston called Beck, Redden, and Seacrest at the time, now known as Beck, Redden, LLP. So I've had a really fun, exciting beginning to my career.
That's really tremendous. Okay, so when you think about the fact that you made the determination to shift and apply for law school, you're rejected multiple times. What, because there are a lot of people who struggle with rejection, right? So I just want to hang out on that just for a moment. So because that is as someone who cares about people's thinking, that is a thought pattern that can really wreak havoc in someone's life. What did you do to not get stuck in the I've been rejected all of these times?
I don't know if there's any secret sauce to it other than I was young, I believed in myself, and I just kept telling myself, I mean, I had a history of successes, I guess is what I should say before I say anything else, right? I've been very fortunate. I've been very blessed. As a kid, I was very athletic. And so I was always on like the all-star teams or getting blue ribbons and that kind of a thing, right? And I was always very good in school. I graduated co-valedictorian in my high school class. I graduated with honors from Texas A&M, first in my classroom from law school. So I've always been very good. And so I just fall back on that. There are going to be moments in life when the hurdle seems a little higher than it should be, but I've always been able to figure a way around it. And where there's a will, there's a way. There is some merit to that saying. And I always tell myself too that God won't put you in a position where it's too much for you. He won't give you an opportunity without giving you the ability. And so I figured in myself, I tell myself, if it's God's will, it's going to happen. And if it's not his will, it won't happen. But I've got to put in the effort to make it happen. Like, had I not picked up the phone and called the school and said, please explain to me what it is about my application that isn't good enough, I would have never known. I would have never gone down this path. And to this day, the person who answered that call is still at the school and still my friend, and we still are connected.
Wow.
I tell her, you're the reason I went to law school, was because you asked the admissions council to hold on to my application for a couple more, or actually more than a couple of weeks, but a few weeks, so I could take that extra step.
So when you think there are multiple things that you just said that caught my attention. First, when you talked about I asked you, how did you not get stuck in the rejection? What you got to was, I had a history of successes, and you recounted some of those. And I believe that is so important for people who want to think better, is to actually be able to, in a sense, cheerlead for themselves based on past successes. So I just think that's an important call out that you made where that is concerned. Secondly, that I'm saying you are, but back then you also were speaking to yourself about your ability to get over the hurdle that seemed a little bit higher. And then finally, the other thing that stood out to me is you advocated for yourself.
Yes.
Okay, so when you think about this advocation, there are people who are listening, watching, and they are in a spot in their life. Maybe it's rejection. Maybe it's the hurdle is too high. Maybe it's any number of other things that have them feeling stuck. What would you say to the person listening about how they, in their own way, keep moving forward? If you had to put it into maybe a single statement, what would you say?
Interesting. I think the most important thing that anyone can do for themselves is to always remember that we are what we think about. And I think it's important, when I'm mentoring younger lawyers, I ask them things like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I ask them things that help them get out of the moment and try to see into the future, so they can create a visual in their head that then they can grab onto, right? Because there's a saying, people won't buy a house if they can't see themselves living in it.
So true.
And I think it's a lot of that too with careers and with decisions, is that we tend to want to visualize what we want to be. And so that's why I think a lot of us, take pictures and post them on around saying, I want that car, or I want that body, or I want whatever, right? I want. So they're gentle reminders. So the brain starts to process that that's attainable. And for me, it was just going back to what I already knew and sort of seeing myself in that moment in the future in my own head before it became a reality.
I love that, and it very much matches the brain science of it all. Is that the brain does think in pictures, and the more you can. That's why visualization is such a tried and true method for your top athletes or people who are at the top of their career, whatever that chosen path is. I'm appreciating you using the example of people won't buy a house that they can't see themselves living in, because that's why staging has become such a big deal for people to understand the possibilities that exist in the space. So that's tremendous where that's concerned. Now you went from, I love how you had a clever way of saying it. You went from being in the courtroom to the conference room, and then I think you said from public to private. What, did I miss this? Okay.
No, that's spot on.
So what did you love about the courtroom? What was maybe your biggest challenge about the courtroom?
So everything about the courtroom I loved.
Okay.
It's a wonderful, first of all, it's a phenomenal system of government that we have. And it is an absolute privilege to be a licensed lawyer and have that ability to stand up and advocate for someone else, whether it be, a company with 10,000 employees or a mom and pop that is, backed by private equity, or wants to be backed by whatever. It is a privilege. And so the adrenaline rush of, preparing and doing all the late night work, not so much fun. In the courtroom, a tremendous amount of fun. And the ability to articulate, think on your feet, respond quickly, engage with strangers and your opposing counsel, and learning strategy, learning how to take some really weaknesses in a case and address them in a way that is still persuasive so you can still come out on the other side in a position that is good for your client.
Yeah, that's so good. Now, because you loved everything in the courtroom, and I want to acknowledge that I'm grateful to hear you articulate that we have a phenomenal court system, right? And specifically, you said a privilege to represent people within it. I believe that we need to hear more of that, because people often question in their mind, is it really a great system? So I love hearing that you are saying that. So you loved so much about it. What had you thinking, I want to move to mediation and arbitration, where you went from the courtroom to the conference room, from a very public, persona to a more private persona. Tell me about that.
Well, it's there's a couple of factors there. One is just our system, is wonderful as it is overloaded.
Okay.
So the reality of it is, before COVID, I would have a prospective client walk into my office and say whatever they would say. And it was, the conversation heavily was like, here are our options. If we decide to go down the courthouse option, whatever that might be, it's probably going to be about 18 to 24 months before we get our first trial setting.
Wow.
Remember, the key word in that is your first trial setting.
Right.
You're likely not going to get reached in your first trial setting. But maybe 6 months after that, maybe a year after that, we'll get to most cases resolved, right? Before they get to the trial setting. During COVID, that number escalated to 5 to 6 years before your first trial setting, because of the backlogs, right? And the number of cases that were getting filed. So the reality of it is while I love being in the courtroom, less than 1% of all cases filed get tried. Less than 1%. Now, let's just take Harris County for an example, right? In Harris County, there's between 85 and 95,000 cases, civil cases, not criminal, just civil.
How many?
85 to 90,000 a year get filed. So it is very hard to, when you love the courtroom as much as I do, to know that the cost, both in finances, in time, in stress, in everything, right, is tremendous on the client. So fast forward, we're in COVID. I took a step back and I remembered my last federal trial. It was a week and a half long trial. So I told you there were 2 points. One was that. The second point is this. I'm sitting in my office one day, minding my own business, doing what I do for a living, representing clients, and a bouquet of flowers walks in with my secretary. And she says to me, "You won't believe who these are from. It's not your birthday or your anniversary. Guess." And it was from a young, up-and-coming energy executive who was in his late 20s, who was one of my clients in my last federal trial. And he sent them to me on the anniversary of the day the jury came back with a favorable verdict, and finding no fraud, finding things that could have ruined his career. And he said, "Thank you for saving my career," or words to that effect. He remembered that moment on the anniversary of it. I had forgotten about it. In that moment, I was like, what is it that I'm doing? What is it that we do as lawyers? We deliver a process for resolution. And if it's going to take 3 to 4 to 5, sometimes 10 and more years to get through the system to get to resolution, how many more people, companies, lawyers can I serve if I'm able to help them find resolution outside of the courtroom, where most cases get resolved anyways, since they're not going to trial.
Right.
So now I mediate, 100 or more cases a year and resolve a lot more of the disputes that are in the system, helping them get out of it. And we can do it. We can talk about the process and all that, but the history of mediation is phenomenal. And that is, it used to be, we didn't really mediate cases until the 80s. We started getting, and in the 90s, we started getting some court-connected mediations going. And usually the mediations would occur closer to the trial setting. I was on the team that got ABA Resolution 500 promoting early dispute resolution, unanimously passed by the American Bar Association House of Delegates in February of 2024. And there are others that I'm working with on a national level to bring early dispute resolution mediations into the forefront so that parties are able to effectively have a confidential setting in which they stay in control to talk about how to resolve their dispute. It can be within the context of a lawsuit or before the lawsuit, but it is a way to resolve that legal matter and much more efficiently, cost efficiently, and time efficiently.
Wow. So not only did you come to the realization, because to me, you're logically thinking this young executive could spend 5+ years waiting for it to go to trial versus settling it outside of that. And, I'm thinking if you're 28 and you're told it could be 5 years before, this is ever anything happens with it. I mean, I'm just thinking the mental anguish, how it impacts everything about your life in such a pivotal time frame of career development. And what you provided was a true gift. I can see why he sent you a bouquet of flowers, in memory of the remembrance of it, because it was that impactful to him. So this led you to this passion, it sounds like, because you're now finding ways to promote the arbitration system. So you mentioned the American Arbitration Association, and then the EDR, you said that's early what?
Early dispute resolution.
Early dispute resolution. So give me, for someone listening who, we hear words like mediation, arbitration, but they're going, I don't think I fully understand. Obviously, probably more in layman's terms, or if you could give us a Cliff Notes version, walk us through what that looks like for people.
Sure. Mediation in general. So it's both mediation and arbitration are sometimes referred to as ADR, alternative dispute resolution.
Okay.
Because judges nowadays typically won't allow a case to go to trial before it's mediated, a lot of us, myself included, just call it another dispute resolution. It's just a dispute resolution. But so it is, here's an example, right? Party A and Party B, one says they didn't, one breached the contract, one says they didn't. They each hire their lawyers. They don't have to have lawyers, but they each hire the lawyers. They say, let's go have a conversation about what this is about. Because let's face it, a lot of disputes that are at the courthouse are miscommunications, misunderstandings.
Yes.
Emotional, and or whatever. So the Texas legislature, in their infinite wisdom, passed a statute and made all mediations completely confidential. So this is something that is really, really, really valuable to parties because it's like Las Vegas. Everything that happens in mediation stays
in mediation. Okay.
Right? So we can talk very candidly. I'm able to, the parties either remotely by Zoom or in person will gather. I do caucuses, so they're each in their separate rooms with their counsel, private, confidential. I go in and I listen. I listen. And I bring my experience to bear in the courtroom as to how things might look. We call it the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. They're BATNA, right?
Okay.
How things might look if you choose not to resolve the case on whatever terms are proposed during the mediation process, and you go down to the courthouse. And the reality of it is that a judge is confined. A judge really can make a few decisions for you, right? Someone will be awarded money or not. Someone might be forced to do something or not to do something, or there may be a declaration declares this contract to be X, Y, and Z.
Right. Okay.
Right? Those three things. That's really all a judge can do. During the mediation process, what we are able to do is I'm able to listen and say, look, here's what the other side is saying about this case and where they think, a jury might be persuaded. Or have you thought about the impact of this on your business for the next 5 years? Or I can ask those questions. And one of the most insightful questions is, what do you really want to see out of this? It's a strategic question because you don't want to have Pyrrhic victories, right? You don't want to go down to the courthouse and spend all this time and money and end up in a worse position than you were before. So back and forth, negotiation, terms are exchanged. Here's what I would propose. Here's what you propose. And why is it so important that you're not limited by either a declaration or an injunction or money? Because a lot of these deals get done. The secret sauce is we want to revise the provision in our agreement. I need a payment plan because I can't,
right.
Yes, I wronged you, but I can't afford to pay you X $1,000.
Right.
I can pay you this much per month. Or it could be a whole host of things. In employment matters, you might set up a system by which, an employee gets some sort of softer landing in terms of how they're let go from the business. There are the number of ways that parties can really resolve their own disputes. And key here is they stay in control. I'm not in control. I'm neutral. I am simply a messenger helping them to strategically think through kind of what all of their options are. And oftentimes that process itself allows their brain to shift. When we mediate cases that have been in the system for a long time, think about this. For months, years, they've been talking with their lawyer about what a jury might do or what a judge might do. What I'm asking them in mediation is completely different. What do you want to do?
Yes.
What do you think the other side, how do you think the other side feels? And what do you think they might be willing to do? So instead of persuading strangers, stranger danger, instead of persuading 12 strangers or a judge in a black robe, now your audience is your neighbor. It's the person in that room over there.
Yeah.
And there's a different message that will resonate And the way the brain processes that is way different than when you're in a courtroom in a stifling environment and all of the control is handed over to your lawyers and to strangers. So it's a way of getting that conversation going.
Oh my, I mean, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking there are so many. I'm going to have you back on because we could really dissect some of the actual brain science behind. I have no doubt how you're able to be successful in what you do because, in effect, you are giving them an opportunity to have cognitive reframing, right? When you take it out of that courtroom and you bring it into a conference room, when you make it less about I've given up control and more about I have control, literally you are shifting how their brain is not only thinking about the circumstances. You said something that goes right back to an earlier piece, which is people will not buy a house if they cannot see themselves in it. You talked about them being able to see, right? What are they seeing? And that's not just about what do they want to see in their business, but it's also about seeing the other person in the other room for the person that they are, for the realities of their circumstance, for how we might come to resolution. I'm so glad I asked you to walk me through the process that you take folks through because I imagine that with your 100 plus, you said mediation / arbitrations in a year, that you have developed quite a successful rate of resolution with people.
Yeah, it's not bad. And just to be clear, the arbitration is completely different. In the arbitration, they do cede control to me because I'm like a private judge.
You did say that. Thank you. So give me the quick where the key differences are. So with mediation, you're neutral. With arbitration, they're saying you get to judge.
I'm still the neutral. I'm still neutral, but now I'm the judge. I am a private judge. They file their pleadings, they conduct some discovery. It's all in a confidential arena, though. It's outside of the public sector. We're not filing it in a governmental agency where there's juries. I am, as an arbitrator, the fact finder and the determinator. So we issue not judgments like a judge will issue a judgment. We issue awards after evidentiary hearings or after a process in which the case is presented on the papers. And those awards, they're legal. They are enforceable. What you do with an arbitration award, if your counterparty, whoever loses, if they're ordered to do something, those can be taken down to the courthouse. A case can be opened up on that award, and that award can be turned into a judgment and enforced like any other trial court judgment is enforced. But the key here is it's a much faster process. Most of my arbitrations, depending on the complexity of them, we can get done within a year.
Wow.
So think about the contrast and compare there. The trade-off is I get paid as an arbitrator by the parties, not by the government. I'm not a government employee, but you have the ability to pick an arbitrator, if you choose to go this route, who has expertise in the area. I told you I was on the energy, commercial, and consumer. So I have expertise. I'm not an expert, but I have experience in those areas. And so when you select me or I'm appointed, you know that I'm not asking, some of the basic questions. You're not having to teach a jury.
Because you have experience in that. Wow. But I think the key here in both mediation and in arbitration, to your point, is that you are dramatically changing the timeline for resolution. And that, to me, there is so much value. There's so much value in really reducing that timeline. I want to go back to, because of the amount of time that we have, we'll stick with mediation just to think about the core principles of what makes that so powerful. If you were to encourage someone who's listening and they're in a dispute with someone, okay, maybe it's not at the level of we need to hire a mediator. But when you think about the core principles of what you do as a mediator, how you help people to see it differently, how would you encourage the listener to apply some of those principles in their own lives?
It's, this needs to be taught in school, actually.
Agreed. Agreed.
Because there's a proverb: train up a child in the way they should go, and when they grow old they won't depart from it. There's things we learn that stick with us, and one of them for successful mediation is to seek to understand before seeking to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too often we all have filters. We all experience the world differently. You can ask two eyewitnesses to tell you what they saw in the same accident, and they're going to tell you two different versions because they each saw it from their own perspective.
Yes.
So what I can say about that is this: just listen, and listen without judgment. Right? Be open to the idea that no one is wrong, but there might be a misunderstanding. If we're talking about interpersonal conflict, right? If we're talking about, a real legal conflict, I deal with a lot of businesses, and so sometimes there are legal issues that have to be dealt with. Still, even there, every business is made up of people.
Yeah,
and true. Every case needs witnesses, and so it boils down to, what is the human aspect of it that you might be able to address, and be open to learning something in the process. Be curious about it, and this word sometimes gets misunderstood, but do it with an empathic approach. In the sense that one of the things I learned as a young lawyer, because I had imposter syndrome like you wouldn't believe, is I would try to put myself in someone else's shoes. And I find that if you can try to put yourself in someone else's shoes, you can better understand maybe how they're thinking, which then gives you the ability to maybe respond in a way that they'll not only hear you, but listen to you.
Yeah, that's so valuable. And I agree, just listening to you, it does underscore how much value there would be in this type of teaching to younger people in order that they can grow into adulthood with a better mindset around having a crucial conversation. Because I'm listening to you and I'm like, when I think about the core aspects of a crucial conversation, you've just stated it in such a way that it is still in alignment with crucial conversation. And to me, as I observe our culture, the conversations that are happening in our communities, our cities, our counties, our state, et cetera, that it is a challenge for people to have crucial conversations, to seek to understand before being understood, to think about what is my filter, and that appreciating that someone could have a different filter, to listen without judgment, you said. I love that you said be open to the idea that no one is wrong, but there actually could just be a misunderstanding, and to be curious about it. And it's interesting for the listener, when Felicia and I were connecting before I hit record, just before we went on, she said, I have to say, this is, challenging because she's the one that's accustomed to asking all of the questions. And that goes right along with what you just said, because one of the best ways to be curious is to ask questions and listen. And so I'm so grateful that you were providing such great richness to principles that can be applied no matter what the situation is with an individual. And that is, it's just so impactful. Okay, for time purposes, I want you to share, because I ask every guest, why do you believe it's important to cultivate thinking that matters?
For all the reasons we just talked about. We are what we think about. I mean, if you believe you can achieve something, you're halfway there, because your mind will, our minds are phenomenal muscles. I would call it a muscle. I don't know if that's the right term for it, because I'm not a scientist, but they grow, right? And they grow if they're used. So the more you read, the more you study, the more you know about something, you become an expert in it. It's kind of like a muscle in your arm or your leg. You got to use it or you lose it. And so if you're thinking positive thoughts and you think that you can do something, your body will respond, your psyche will respond. And so it's so important, I think, to wake up every day, and before you even get out of bed, just to say thank you. Just, here's another opportunity for good things to happen. And sometimes bad things happen, but guess what? It's all part of a larger plan. Life is a marathon, not a sprint, is what I used to tell some of my clients, because let's just be real. They come to me for help in a point in their career or their business or whatever, in which they're in a rough spot.
Yes.
And what those rough spots teach us, experience is a tough teacher, the toughest. She gives the test first and the lesson afterwards. So when you come and ask for assistance through a tough spot, there is a teaching moment in that you can then take forward into something else later. And so life is a marathon, not a sprint. In a marathon, there are those moments when you feel like I can't keep going. This is too much. But then you get your second wind. And so that's for life, it's your brain, right? When you have a hiccup, take a step back, reflect, go. I used to say, I'm an athlete. So go to the stadium, go sit on the top row on the bleachers and visualize how all the people are moving around in your world and what's causing what's not causing what, and find a way in your own brain to put yourself in that situation to try to improve whatever it is that's not going well. And for yourself, don't expect someone else to do it for you. Do it for yourself, because you're the only thing you can control. You can't control what anybody else does or what anybody else says, but you can control how you react to it. And this is something that I teach them, in my mediations, is I say when I know I'm going to have to deliver some news that the other side is not going to really be very excited about, I say to them, now, what I'm about to tell you is it's not going to be something you want to hear, but don't react. Let's respond to it, which means just listen for a second. And then I will say it, right? And they're going to react, because that's what we do. But I'm like, now let's take a moment and now let's figure out how we want to respond to that.
I love it. So many nuggets. I want to encourage the listener or the viewer. You would benefit from listening to this episode a second time and really pulling some of the numerous nuggets that have come out of Felicia's mouth today, for which I am indeed grateful. And so thank you so much for sharing from the course of your experience and the choices that you have made and how you are working to impact people through your mediation and also your arbitration services. Just so there's clarity, what would be the best way for them to learn more? And do you only serve within Texas, only around the Houston area? Help the listener to understand that.
Sure. No, my offices are in Houston, but I conduct remote services through Zoom, and I also do travel. The easiest way to reach me is my website. It's harrishosspllc.com. My email address is just my first name, Felicia, at harrishosspllc.com. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I'm very active in the State Bar of Texas's ADR section, and I'm on the executive committee of the American Bar Association section of dispute resolution. I'll be chair of that section in a few years.
Wow.
And so you can usually see me at conferences, whenever we have them. I do a lot of public speaking on early mediations. Like I said, I'm a part of the American Arbitration Association's mediation panel as well, and helping put together a specialty panel for EDR mediations with some of my colleagues within the American Arbitration Association and in the mediation arena. So you can probably find me, and I would love
a number of places
to help anyone who has a mediation need. for a conflict. And
I love it. Well, and I would encourage that we'll have that detail. We'll have those details in the show notes, so you can check that out there. So be sure to like and follow Felicia, specifically on LinkedIn. I know for sure. And Felicia, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your time and your wisdom. And for my listeners, be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. That is how we extend our reach and we serve more people. And remember, when you cultivate thinking that matters, you can cultivate a life that matters.